warm water.
All right, well, I know it's 2 minutes after. Let's see if anyone's in Zoom.
After I've gone about 600 yards, which is about as much as I swim now, it's like, oh, I'm pretty hot. And I don't generate much heat anymore as an old guy.
Yeah, that's why I like the Newburgh pools better, because it's a lot colder.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Steve, Lisa, and.
Know enough that as you're
Perfect.
moving hard, it's not the right
So
water temperature.
we have
but
Nick
For my age
on
group, it's
Zoom,
perfect.
Lisa, and Keith Mays. So we
Okay.
have two
I usually
members
do
that are
butterfly
online.
and freestyle.
Okay.
Okay.
And-
So let's get that up. Yeah.
Yep.
We don't have.
I was mostly a backstroker. I can still swim as fast or faster with backstroke than with freestyle.
You don't want the people.
Who knew?
And then the presentation.
Back muscles stronger than your,
Nick has a
I guess,
presentation.
your pecs. Or your back and your triceps are stronger than your pecs and your biceps.
I don't know what it is. I have technique issues, especially kicking on my front, so I think that has a little to do with it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight's second Citizen Advisory Committee meeting for the Sherwood Transportation System Plan update. Whew. So welcome, everyone. What we'll probably do is just do some introductions, just because we have some new members, and just to familiarize yourselves with the individuals in the room. So I'm Joy Chang, and I am the project manager for the city in regards to this TSP update.
Recording in progress.
Oh, and please do use the mic, because for some odd reason, we can't capture the audio unless you're actually talking to the mic.
You need to be holding the button.
No,
Mine's on.
as long as the screen.
Alex Whitaker, architecture, residential and commercial. I've been in Sherwood for a year and a half now, I guess. I live pretty close to the bridge. The bridge is awesome, by the way. Love the bridge, use the bridge almost every day. And I'm just happy to be a part of the team.
My name's Akwesi Kobana. I'm a 10th grader. I'm here to represent the Youth Advisory Board. I'm just excited to learn about how Sherwood's transportation works, and excited to try to use the best of my abilities to help out this committee. So, yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I'm Jim Booker. I am an avid walker, occasional bicycle rider. So I like those aspects of our transportation system and dream of more. I'm also on our Park and Rec Advisory Board.
You turned it off.
Okay, I'm Jason Wirtz. I am lived in Sherwood for 20 plus years, and I'm here on behalf of the Traffic Safety Board.
Great.
And I'm Cliff Taylor. I'm here on behalf of the Sherwood Senior Center Advisory Board. 28 years in Sherwood.
Hello. Oh, there it is. Hey, I'm Brady Strutz. I'm with Sherwood School District. I'm also a 5-year member of the Sherwood community.
Tyler Barnes, also a 5-year member, and I'm representing the Planning Commission.
Jason Waters, city engineer for the city, also a long-term resident of the city.
My name is Philip Worth. I'm a consultant on under contract to the city to help prepare the city's transportation system plan. Nick?
Good evening, everyone. Nick Meltzer. I'm on the consultant team with Phil.
And I'm Keith Mays.
longtime resident, 28, 29 years, so representing City Council.
And then Lisa.
Hi, Lisa Patterson. I been a resident for 4 years in Sherwood and serve on the traffic safety board with Jason. Awesome.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. So with that, we'll move it to community comments. We actually did not receive any for this meeting, so we can check that off the list.
Okay. So Nick, if you'll pull up the presentation. This evening we're going to use a PowerPoint presentation to help move us through quite a bit of material. Most of what we're showing this evening came to you in the form of a packet, a technical memorandum that we had produced called Existing Conditions. So we're going to go through that in very much a high-level highlight perspective. That's the first half of the meeting. The second half of the meeting is much more interactive, we hope. The purpose of it is to talk with you about ways in which we might be able to measure the transportation system in Sherwood and how well it's doing in meeting your needs as members of the community. That's pretty high level for now. We'll get into more detail when we get to that portion of the presentation. But really tonight is about two topics, and the first one's existing conditions. Go ahead, Nick. So this memorandum that we produced, its purpose was to summarize an inventory of what makes up the city's transportation system. You intuitively know that to be the roads, the sidewalks, the bike lanes, the trails, the shared use paths, the transit system. You might not think about it as often, but we also think about transportation from the standpoint of freight rail lines or navigable waterways, power and transmission lines of a certain size or scale. All of those things end up making up the city's transportation system, and it's the job of the city every 10 years or so to update their plan for that system and identify ways in which we can improve the system but to better meet the needs of the community and those who travel through Sherwood, because for facilities like Highway 99, we know it's not just serving people that live or work here in Sherwood, it's serving a lot of other people and purposes beyond that. So a couple of caveats that we have at the front end of this is the data that we use in doing this existing conditions analysis is kind of a picture in time. It's always changing. New things are getting built and old things are getting replaced or are in the process of changing. And so we don't always represent exactly what's happening because, again, it's a picture in time. The data sets that we're drawing on largely are a few years old, as you see up on the screen, from 2022 and 2023. So you may know of things that we don't simply because it's happened in relatively recent times. And in addition, some of the data that we're relying on is frankly still in the process of being fully developed and fully reviewed and confirmed. And so it may mean that there is some information in our memorandum that isn't quite right or is blatantly wrong. And that's now is one of those times where if you know we've got an error, by all means let us know. With respect to your review of this document that you have until Monday, December 1st to provide any and all of your feedback with respect to that document. So that gets you all the way through the Thanksgiving holiday and the weekend after to provide us whatever feedback that you'd like to share, in addition to your chance to talk with us tonight about it. And then lastly, you're really familiar with Sherwood West, and it's starting to become a part of your community, but it isn't officially yet part of your community for the purpose of updating your transportation system plan. So we're going to do our best to kind of represent that it's there, but it won't be our job to do any analysis of that area, especially from a transportation perspective. So it's mostly provided in terms of context, but not real detail. And with those caveats, we'll plow into this.
So Phil,
Yeah.
in regards to Sherwood West, the goal is once, because it's on a different timeline than we are, we're progressing as far as within the next 2 years, we'll have something adopted. So once Sherwood West comprehensive plan is completed, as far as they're going to put zoning, identify zoning aspect of it, and that once that's done, we'll do an amendment to the TSP to incorporate that piece of land in the work that you guys will have accomplished.
Thanks, Joy. So starting to look at this overview of the transportation system, 3 pieces of that system are showing up on the screen right now. That being the roads that we all have and often use, the sidewalk and walkway system that we have, and then the bicycle system. What you're seeing in a graph is a way of representing really the other 2 things, sidewalks and bicycle facilities, relative to the roadways. So if our roadways, which happens to be almost 75 miles of roads in Sherwood, if that represented 100% of what you would want to have, then when we look at the sidewalk and bicycle system, we're not at 100% of what we would want to have relative to our roadways. In terms of our walkway miles, we have about 85% of what would be the equivalent of roadway miles to meet our walking needs in the community. And from a biking perspective, we're really only at about 20% of an equivalent type of bike network to the roadway network that you have today. And again, this is a snapshot in time, but it's one way to kind of help us understand or appreciate when we talk about these different modes of travel and the networks that make them up, just how robust are those networks. And I think immediately you get the picture that our bicycle network is not as robust as our sidewalk network or our roadway network. And that's all that we're asking you to get from this slide. Any questions or comments on this before we move on?
But to be clear, I'm rather snarky on your bicycle and shared path numbers, and I'll give feedback, between now and the deadline, but because that's underrepresented.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to get any and all feedback. In this circumstance, we've chosen to include the mileage of shared use path, which means it could be used by a cyclist or someone walking, thus the notion of shared use. We've included that length of your shared use path in both categories. Fundamentally, we're double counting, in other words. But it's because it has that dual utility or dual purpose to it. So, Nick, next.
Oh, I'm sorry, before we go,
go
on that, it really is important with that graph to have the definition of what's included with the walkway and the bikeway miles. The walkway is mostly sidewalks we're talking about. And then I had to go back through here to actually see on the multi-use. There's more definitional stuff. I know in Park and Rec, we say we have 9 miles of trails. And there's about 20 miles of trail/multi-use represented there in addition to the sidewalks. So I'm not sure where all of that is buried in the details.
Correct. All of it's buried in the details, yeah. And we have obviously aggregated a lot of information to create this kind of simple perspective on the networks. But yes, we know the length of the trails, the length of the shared use paths, the length of the sidewalks. Each of those numbers is available, and if it isn't directly in the document, we can still provide it. It's in our databases. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on this before we move on?
Well, I'll start.
Yeah.
Right with this slide right here now, which mimics the narrative, which identifies really sidewalks as being the pedestrian system here. And I think that's just an oversight in the current narrative, that the multi-use paths and others are not discussed in the narrative, maybe further down there listed in a table or something.
Okay.
But the impression that one gets at this point is that you're just talking about sidewalks. And that really isn't what Sherwood is about with its pedestrian system. We're really about a lot of trails and pathways as well. I was motivated by this to actually go down and check our pathway use versus our sidewalk use. So I went down in the morning by Stellar Drive and the pedestrian pathway that goes along the creek and comes out at Stellar. And we had in a half-hour period, we had about 20 people who came out of the pathway in a 20-minute period. And we only had about 6 people walking down the sidewalk at that same spot. So we had about 3 times the use of the pathway as the sidewalk. In the afternoon, then, I went down to Villa Drive, which probably isn't in there because it's a very narrow lane that has no sidewalk. It's a perfect transportation facility for us. In a half-hour period, it had 40 people using it, mostly middle schoolers, but a good number of non-students as well. I had no nearby sidewalk to compare it to, but this one key piece was really, really heavily used, and it's not identified as part of our transportation system, and yet it's a key link.
Thank you.
So I'll elaborate in my written things about that. But I just wanted to bring up that as an example that a focus on sidewalks for pedestrians doesn't really get at our transportation system here, particularly because we have a number of direct links between areas, such as from Brookman that has public land, has Sherwood City land, but there's no way for a pedestrian to connect with the rest of the city from there. So these are just, the emphasis on sidewalks, I think, I would like to see that looked at a little differently.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that because that's unintentional, I'll put it that way. We definitely are accounting for, through the data that we have, for the shared use paths, for the sidewalks, for the trails, keeping them discreetly recognizable while still doing things like we did with the graph of rolling the data up to get this kind of higher level picture of things. Yeah, but yeah, keep us on our toes.
I think I would just add, we did, I appreciate that comment too, and we talked a lot about the shared use paths, and we definitely thought about them, we definitely mapped them. It sounds like we thought about them as part of the pedestrian system, but it sounds like we didn't do a good job incorporating them into the discussion. So I appreciate that feedback. We did think about them a lot and think about how we could incorporate them into the system. So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. Okay. So in broad strokes, the memo that we provided you is roughly 75 pages, and we're not going to go page by page. And so you're going to get a lot of these kind of broad, summary, high-level statements like you see here about each of the networks that make up the entire system. And so if there's something here that kind of piques your interest or leaves you questioning by all means, raise the question now, and Nick and I will do our best to answer. But also trust that there is documentation in that memo that maybe you hadn't gotten to yet. So as we summarize the pedestrian system, what you see here is our assessment that the sidewalk system itself, those primarily concrete walkways that are adjacent to the roads, they're in good condition, a good physical condition, in other words, and that there is generally good coverage that we're getting with that sidewalk network, in addition to the shared use paths and the trails. But there are still some places that are stronger than others. Some places don't have an equivalent number or quality of facility as you would get in other areas of the community. And that's part of what we're trying to pay attention to, because it isn't necessarily just that we have a lot of it, but is it in the right place? Does it create good connections? And is it serving the community in an equitable way? And so that all of those dimensions of that notion of adequacy or suitability plays into what we're trying to do here. There are, you see, with respect to marked crossings, many of them happen, and largely they're near our schools, which is, of course, a very good thing, and other activity centers. But there are some places, especially along 99W and Roy Rogers Road, where we don't have the kind of frequency of marked crossings that we would like to have to give people that sense of comfort and encouragement that walking is, in fact, something that we want the community to feel comfortable doing.
And you're just irritating me on that whole thing. So 99 is intentional from the state to limit access points there, and as well as crossings. So it's if you want to list it, great. It's not going to change beyond us doing more enhanced crossings at spots where we're planning, and same with Ray Rogers. So
okay, thank you. And then the last point here is wherever there are transit stops, we want to see that there's a network of bicycle and pedestrian facilities that make the link to the final destination. Most transit stops don't drop us at the door that we're trying to ultimately get to. So we have to finish that trip some other way, often by walking. So we're looking at, do we have a good connection from the transit stop to the activity centers that are nearby? Any more comments on this before the next slide is a map of the pedestrian system? Go ahead, Nick. So what's depicted here is the pedestrian facilities. They're color-coded. I know it's a bit difficult to see on screen. The green lines that are most prevalent are representing primarily sidewalks. And the fact, because it's green, the fact is that they're deemed to be in good condition. If they're fair or poor, they're yellow or red. So the good news is you don't see much yellow or red on this map. So that's how we draw the conclusion that a good portion of our pedestrian facilities are in good condition.
Just a note that this map is part of where my comment came from, is that the places I was talking about are not on this map.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And the narrative that the sidewalk network is not strong on the northwest side of 99 is flawed, because it is quite strong over there too.
And this may mean that we need to go back and double check our databases to ensure that they are accurate and bring them current where we're missing some type of information.
So how was the data ground truthed?
So in this case, there's a couple of different sources happening. ODOT has, around the state, done a comprehensive effort to collect pedestrian and bicycle network data. And they've created a very significant database for each community and then provided it to the community to help with plans just like this one. So one of our primary sources is ODOT and their inventory, as they call it, of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. Secondly, the city's own database of facilities that they have is coupled with that, and where there are differences, city staff reviewed to determine which source was the right or better source to rely on. And then lastly, Metro, which is a regional agency here, has extensive data that's also available for us to draw on. And so we consulted all three sources to come up with what you're looking at.
So these were actually, and I appreciate that, thank you. I guess my question is more narrowly defined, is were these pathways walked or, to be ground truthed versus just having GIS data?
So no, they weren't walked, to be blunt. Yeah.
I'll add that clearly our off-street trails are missing from the maps here, and we'll need to correct these maps, I think, and
They're on bike facility maps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got them.
It's, I think maybe the way we're defining it's just a little bit
misleading.
Not clear here in this first round.
Yeah, you have definition problems for sure on your bike and pedestrian
I
stuff.
have a question, or
Yes.
maybe also clarification to piggyback on whether it was ground truth. Didn't the city do a comprehensive sidewalk evaluation as part of the ADA transition plan? They run through it with that company that comes through and the little baby stroller thing.
Yeah, we do have some ADA transition plan data. I don't know if we've incorporated it here, but I believe we did, but.
Okay, I was just wondering if that
we adopted
was part
that.
of your GIS system that fed into the pedestrian network in your GIS system and the condition.
Yes, we have some data from the ADA transition plan. I just don't know if it's been truthed here, but clearly we've got to make our maps clear and make our definitions of what shared use pathways are.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's keep moving, Nick. So in the bicycle system, here you're seeing what makes up the bike network. In this case, it's defined as having the shared use paths, the on-street striped bike lanes, shared bike lanes, paved shoulders, and trails. And it sounds like, Jim, you kind of picked up on the line work when you looked at the bike map. In other words, yeah. And from a coverage perspective, we're seeing good connections to schools, parks, commercial centers. Those are always the things we initially look for, are connections to those types of civic uses and high ped bike activity areas of any community. The next thing that you're seeing here, this notion of bicycle level of traffic stress, that's a technical term. It's a methodology that we use to evaluate the quality that a facility provides to a rider. And so a very good quality, very comfortable, safe or low stress bicycle facility would score a 1. And a bike facility that was very uncomfortable and only the most skilled and aggressive kind of bicyclist might feel comfortable riding it, that would score a 4. So that's your range is 1 to 4. And initially, our thinking is if the system is rated as a 1 or a 2, that many riders, not all by any means, but many riders are going to find that type of facility comfortable enough to use that they would rely on it, that they could make the choice, I'm going to ride versus drive or walk. And so what we're finding at this initial level of analysis, or assessment, I should say, is that the predominance of facilities in the city at a network or a corridor level are comfortable. They're in that 1 or 2 range. Now, as a rider, you might feel comfortable riding on a segment of the road, but when you get to that big intersection, you might feel like the intersection that you have to cross is anything but comfortable. And ultimately, that should factor into our assessment of, is this an LTS2 or an LTS3? It should have an effect, in other words, on our judgment of how comfortable is this route from end to end to serve a cyclist's riding needs. So that's yet another aspect of how we look at the bicycle network, is not just whether the bike lane is there or that it's buffered, but what kind of facilities as a rider do you have to cross to get from point A to point B?
I just got a quick question real quick.
Yeah.
How do you measure the LTS of like the bike facilities?
There are a number of things that factor into it. So examples are, what's the posted speed of the roadway that the bike lane is eyed? What's the volume of traffic? How many lanes make up the roadway? Is it 1 lane in each direction or 2 lanes? Also, the mix of vehicles in that motor vehicle traffic stream. Are there a lot of trucks? Are a lot of big trucks? All of those things kind of influence your feeling as you're riding of, am I comfortable, am I safe, or do I feel threatened? And so those factor into that evaluation of level of traffic stress.
So typically, like a local street, like where your house is a low level of 1, because there's usually just residential vehicles, driving it. But let's just take Roy Rogers or Highway 99. Now you're dealing with a 45-mile-an-hour roadway. Also, you have freight and 5 or 6 lanes of traffic.
So Joy, you're wrong.
Oh.
Not to interrupt, but I'm going to interrupt.
Okay.
Roy Rogers, the new stretch of Roy Rogers, the only the section that's in the city, is 35, and it's brand new.
That is correct. So I stand corrected.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Some of this back stuff just is a little bit irritable.
All right. It was just for clarification.
Right, that it's wrong. So, yeah.
Noted.
Then finally here, where this notion of abrupt transitions, that was in essence part of what I was describing when you're riding on a segment that feels comfortable, but then you hit that abrupt transition or that big intersection. If it's a big intersection and it's got a traffic signal, that feels different than a big intersection without the sense of protection that a traffic signal gives you, because you've got that moment in time where you're allowed to cross safely without conflicts from motor vehicles. So we look for those things, and we've found several that are noted here and elsewhere in the document. And then the map on the next page is from the document, summarizing all of those facilities. So again, the legend is trying to show you in color form that LTS rating. So if it's green, it's initially green, or light green is initially assessed as a 1 or 2. 3s are the orange, and 4 is a red.
So if a road has a speed limit of 25 and is such that it's at a rate that, yeah, low volume, or I mean, low speeds, like I'm confused why, like Sherwood Boulevard is rated a 3. I just kind of, I'm stunned by that. Obviously, 12 Sherwood Road has got old data and it's a mess and needs to be fixed.
As an occasional rider, fairly frequently actually on Sherwood Boulevard, I think it is appropriate as a 3 because it really is pretty narrow.
Yeah,
you can ride the sidewalk there, but it also has a lot of abrupt changes in width. I do a lot of skating, getting through Langer Park and that kind of thing to avoid riding Sherwood Boulevard. So I actually, from my personal, not intentional ground truthing, but experience, very comfortable with the LTS ratings you have here and identifying the difficulties. I think it represents things pretty well on the ground.
I would agree with that. And I think there's more potential for distracted drivers on Sherwood than there are on other arterials. And it seems like the rating of 3 is accurate. I mean, I used to ride my kids there along that path all the way to daycare. So yeah, I agree with that. Some of the other areas that are downtown, in Old Town, I think those areas are a little bit more green, level 1 or 2 even than the 3 that's represented, like Pine Street and the area right here in downtown. I think it's well documented that, you know, we got bikes coming in and out and Saturday markets and things like that, and it's pretty well utilized for bikers of all kind of ages. But yeah, ultimately, I think that most of these are correct, especially with Sherwood being the way it is.
Okay.
Sorry, just a comment on Sherwood Boulevard. I think what Councilor's getting at is we believe there may be enough room between the curb-to-curb width to have bike lanes with a turn median, and I think maybe that's something we can look at if the existing width there is able to be restriped for bike lanes.
You bet. Yep. Yeah.
And there's a definite overall movement, just collected to know, of lowering speeds, so which will benefit a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Would that be an
20
option
miles an
for,
hour.
just to follow up with that, would that be an option for like a curbed, like a specific bike lane that is separate, part of the road, but separated by a curb system?
Certainly. Yeah. That notion of separation, whether you do it horizontally or vertically or the combination of the two, all contribute to that sense of comfort and safety that can move you from a 4 to a 3 or from a 2 to a 1. Yeah, so separation is high value when it comes to creating that notion of comfort.
Button doesn't work well. Just to add more context too, I think we've put in the Cedar Creek Trail system, and that was intended to alleviate, you know, bike traffic from Sherwood Boulevard as well. So if that can be accounted for somewhere, that would potentially, once that trail system's completed up to the, you know, Roy Rogers, that may help alleviate and provide an option for Sherwood Boulevard.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Options are a good thing.
I got one quick thing.
Yeah.
Sort of unrelated, but related. When you make these maps, I don't know if the colors choices are standardized across the industry, but if there's like a colorblind button you can push in your choices, might be something to consider.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. We had an earlier meeting today, and a very similar comment was made. So we'll work to create stronger differentiation between the colors and ensure that that the maps can be read for those who are colorblind. Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll keep moving along here. The next map is somewhat related. It's showing you ped bike crossing locations within the city. And this is really simply, again, it's an inventory, but in particular, what it's helping us appreciate is where are the intersections that are signalized, where are the intersections that are unsignalized. So what kind of control device is there, and what type of facilities, like marked crossing or unmarked crossing, is available if you're at that intersection. And so that's inherently the purpose and value of this particular map. The next system is the public transportation system. And
Sorry, before we
please.
go on,
Yeah.
I was waiting for a network connections piece of that, but we didn't do it. So
Oh, go ahead.
if we can go back to the previous map, it'll be a little bit more helpful. But there are.
This one or the
Go
one
off of
before it?
Jason's comment. Yeah, this one.
This one, okay.
On the Cedar Creek Trail, alleviating pressure on Sherwood Boulevard for pedestrian or especially bicycle traffic, I don't think I understand how that works, because most of your traffic is to go to commercial areas there, and there's no connection to the commercial areas. That's particularly important coming from the southeastern part of the community from Woodhaven. There's no way to get to the commercial areas on a bicycle without either going past the senior center and then Sherwood Boulevard, or going even further to go through Langer. We really lack it, or you can go on 99 and connect with 12th. But we don't have a connection of the Cedar, and on the other side of the street also doesn't have a connection at the moment either. So that's one, especially the Woodhaven neighborhood just has no bicycle connectivity without going way out of your way. It's a real problem with the condominiums that are in there. And then you take your life in your hands if you go out on 99W.
Yeah, and I think I was getting at more of the full build-out system, which we're not talking about right now. We're just talking existing system.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, so public transportation in Sherwood, we've got a few choices. So TriMet provides 2 transit lines. We have the county transit service, and then lastly, the city senior shuttle. There's a comment here about the coverage that provides, and also the notion of availability. You know, one of the obvious differences between a transit network like you have here in Sherwood and your street, sidewalk, bicycle facilities is they're permanent, they're always there 24/7. Transit's not always there. It's only there when the bus is there. And so that notion of availability becomes very relevant, very important. And so too is the notion of frequency of service. How often does the bus come and go? And here in Sherwood, your transit service, as compared to many other areas in the metro region, is very, very low level of service. Not really surprising, I think, to any of you. But that would be an independent assessment that this memorandum would otherwise be sharing with the community and with TriMet, the primary provider. When we look at the bus stops, they come with a variety of amenities, some with more amenities than others. Sometimes a bus stop is nothing more than a post with a sign on it. And if we're going to promote transit service, we're also going to need to invest in better transit amenities like shelters and other things that help the rider make the choice and then feel confident that the service is going to be there. So that's a quick overview on public transit, because there's just not that much to talk about. Next, Nick. Then looking at the roadway network itself, this is where some initial technical analysis really comes into play. you see notes here about, well, who owns the system? Your system really is in multiple ownership. That ODOT has the highway, the county has several facilities here, and then the city itself owns the majority from a roadway lane mileage perspective. And arterials, you see a reference here to arterials, and you've seen it in other slides as well, but arterials are that highest order of facility. Local street is the other end of the spectrum, and collectors fall in between the two.
Question.
Yeah, please.
Arterial, an example, Sunset Boulevard, arterial?
Yes. Yeah, there's a list of facilities that you see there. So Tualatin, Sherwood, Elwood, Roy Rogers, Oregon. Yep. All of those are arterials classified here in Sherwood. Again, talking about networks, looking at the roadway network, we see when you compare the notion of the city somewhat divided by the highway and then looking west or east, are there relative differences in kind of the development or quality of the networks? So some comments there about that. And then lastly, we analyzed certain intersections, not every intersection in the community, but certain intersections of concern to the city. And of those that we analyzed, which were 15 in total, there were 3 at the bottom here that you see that from a performance perspective are approaching or exceeding the performance standard that would be set by whichever agency has jurisdiction. So the 2 intersections you see on Highway 99W are exceeding the performance standards, meaning they're not working very well. They're not meeting the standard. And then the one in Oregon and Tonkin Road is approaching that performance standard. So these things factor in ultimately to the identification of a deficiency that ultimately leads to a need for some kind of an improvement. And that's all a part of what this whole plan is about, is figuring out what are the needs of the community, how do we meet those needs, and what kind of an improvement program has to be prepared. Any questions about this or comments? Yeah.
Is this the right time to ask a question about the study intersections?
About intersections? Sure.
Are there some intersections that weren't on the list or the map for study intersections that I think would be worthwhile to include?
Okay.
Is that time passed?
Well, so here's the map of those study intersections, and yeah, go ahead and these were
I can
ones.
provide it written later, but
yeah,
I'm just curious if that, like, if you've identified them, studied them, we're moving on, or is there still opportunity to incorporate intersections?
I'll turn to Jason and Joy on that one.
It's never too late, Jason. We can always make things work. But we on this map here specifically, I think one thing that I'd like to add is that some of the study intersections that are being studied by other jurisdictions, for example, Edie, Elward, is part of a county study right now that we should probably just show, kind of grade out potentially as a study intersection, because obviously that is a major intersection of interest. So what is there any other intersections of note that you have on your mind besides that one?
I mean, top of mind one is Pine and Sunset. I think that's a pretty heavily traveled, and it's a stop controlled on the minor street on Pine. And, you know, I'm assuming as you go through this, like you're looking at existing conditions right now, but part of this whole project or this plan is to look at future growth, right? So as Sunset travel increases, the delay on Pine is going to increase to the point that you might have people taking higher risks and you might have accidents increase. So it seems like a study of that intersection is one that might be.
Because we have a suggestion to do a further study of Third in Pine also. And so that's something that we could tackle. But yeah, I do. That is an important location as well. But yeah, Third and Pine, I think we're suggesting we do a further analysis as part of, I think that came out of the Old Town strategic plan. So Jason's right. We should probably, if we're not studying them, we should at least identify those, and whether we say they're being further studied by a separate project or whatnot. But yeah, I think it's at least Third and Pine, that's of interest, and then Pine and Sunset, and then Edie Elwood, I think, are important to at least put a dot on there to address why we are or aren't studying it with the TSP update.
Murdoch Sunset too. Murdoch at Sunset.
Well, I think that's on there. 10.
Oh.
Yep.
I'm looking at a different one. That's why. Looking at a different figure.
Just another comment too. Just we did, I think, have a lot of those on our initial plate of intersections. Just didn't we just had scope, so we kind of cut them out. And,
I figured, yeah.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Okay, any other comments about intersections at this point? Yes.
There's one right on the corner. It's sort of a county city thing, and that's Brookman and not Chapman. It's on this side. I'm blanking on the name. What is it? Going north-south there.
Middleton?
Lad Hill.
Oh,
Lad
I
Hill.
think you're talking Lad Hill and Brookman. There's also there's been discussions about where that will connect with, is that what you're referring to? Lad Hill Road?
No, the other side, I'm sorry, west of there, what is it? There's a stop sign, it's over towards the railroad tracks. It's right on
Middleton?
the edge of the city.
It's not Middleton?
Middleton, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Middleton and Brookman.
Brookman.
Middleton does not have a stop sign. It's uncontrolled and has a lot of fast traffic through there. The visibility is bad on Brookman. Middleton is a county road. I don't know what Brookman is at this point. Is it still county? A four-way stop there. It's a safety
Yes,
thing.
it's still
It's not really a throughput thing.
Yeah, it's still county roadway, but
Yeah.
worth noting. Okay, yeah, well, fine with me.
Okay,
Thank you, Joy.
thank you. Thank you.
And I have one
Yeah.
in the high school that I'll be submitting afterwards. But,
Okay.
Handley and Elworth.
Okay.
For students who are trying to get around, that's it's a tough left, going up a hill with some limited visibility, and that's one that I just worry about for our young drivers.
Okay.
Are they turning left to get into the high school?
Turning left to get onto Elworth.
To get onto Elwood, okay.
To the high school.
Okay.
Brady, can you turn on your
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good catch. It might be part, that intersection Hanley and Elwood might be part of what the county is working on. I don't know.
I don't think it is exactly, but it is a county facility. I think we need to be clear on what.
Gotcha.
Even the two that we had noted for over the VORC are two ODOT facilities, and then Oregon Tonkin is a county facility as well. But all valid intersections that everybody's bringing up here. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll keep moving on. I made mention earlier about arterials. This map is the representation of how each roadway in the city is classified. Again, it's a hierarchy. Arterials are top of the heap, principal arterials specifically, and then all other arterials. Below that is the collectors, and then neighborhood, and finally local streets. And again, the comment about colors, I appreciate. I myself struggle to differentiate arterial and collector, so we're going to work on that. So this notion of hierarchy always influences our thinking and approach to what's an appropriate way of using this facility, and therefore, based on its use, what's the proper way to treat it to make sure that it functions effectively for all users who should be using that facility. So there's a lot that comes along with this classification. And of course, it also helps in communications between the jurisdictions, given the fact that they've got roadways in the same area, and hopefully all working together to meet our travel needs. Next, Nick. getting near the end here of the existing conditions. So with each TSP, it's very important that we take a look at the reported crashes that have happened in the community and to look at that over a period of time. Crashes happen in many ways, in very random ways. And so in order to overcome the influence of the randomness of crashes, you need to look at a large enough data set to really begin to see whether or not there's a pattern to any of those crashes that are occurring. In addition to that, we always look at the notion of what's the severity of the crash. And of course, the worst thing of all is if there's a fatality that happens or serious injuries. So we pay particular attention to those reported crashes. But that's another important thing to understand. There are a lot of crashes that occur that are not reported. And of those, we know nothing about any of them because they didn't get reported. And sometimes they can even include serious injuries. But again, if it wasn't reported, we don't know about it. So the other thing specific to what you're seeing up here is the very top line. What range of data did we have access to? And in this case, we had access to crashes that were reported between 2019 and 2023. So you might be mindful of more recent crashes. I'm sure they've happened, but they're not in the data set that we analyzed, just to be clear. Go ahead.
Can I ask why it doesn't take, say, a 10-year time period from 2023 back so that you get more statistical accuracy that you were speaking of?
Yeah, well, there's quite a bit of science behind all of this, and over time, what we've determined is that a 5-year period is often sufficient to do this type of initial assessment. It's become, if you will, a standard within the industry. It's particularly true to be a standard here in Oregon because these transportation system plans are done so regularly by so many communities that that builds this database of understanding of how much do we have to look at before we can be confident that we're getting a good picture of what's happening.
I did want to note, I think we have a typo on the fatalities of this slide for 4, should be 3.
Actually, this has just been updated. This is correct.
Okay, where's that? All right.
And it's based literally on what just took place from our meeting today with the Technical Advisory Committee.
Okay, so there was another one out on 99.
So there were, in this time period, there were 3 reported crashes that led to a total of 4 fatalities. So in other words, one reported crash resulted in 2 fatalities.
I believe from the narrative that was 2 pedestrians.
That's correct.
Once.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, 2 kids.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay. So a fair amount of additional information here. I think the only thing that I would draw your attention to, I guess a couple of things. Again, that notion of the seriousness of a crash. We know because we do this work so frequently that pedestrians and bicyclists are much more likely to experience an injury, often a serious injury, by simply being involved in the crash. They're more vulnerable, less protected. It's kind of an obvious thing, right? And so that's why you see the additional level of detail here about pedestrian and bicycle crashes. Out of the 894 crashes we had records of, 31 of them involved pedestrians or bicyclists. Unfortunately, 3 pedestrians fatalities resulted 18 pedestrian injuries and 5 bicycle injuries across that range of crashes that were reported.
The underlying assumption being that a crash is a car or a motor vehicle of some type.
So when we say crash, that's not specific to a mode. So, you know, a bicyclist could crash into a tree. It's still a crash, but it didn't involve a motor vehicle. So a crash is something reported that involved a person and or a vehicle and something that warranted the reporting of the crash, like an injury or property damage or a disruption to flow of traffic that required some kind of emergency response. Yeah.
Would be interesting to know in the details here if shared use paths where pedestrians and bicyclists are together, are we getting crashes there? And if so, how is that being counted?
We can go back and look at the records that we have to identify where on the system the crash is reported to have happened. If it's reported to have happened on a shared use path, we would be able to identify that. So I'm happy to look.
My eyes to the future as well. We got e-bikes, we've got e-scooters, we've got kids and seniors walking together first thing in the morning.
Yep.
Different purposes, different missions. I want to make sure that nobody gets hurt.
Right. Right.
So Phil, in order for a crash to be reported, the police have to be called, right? So that tends to be the threshold for a report being initiated.
That is almost always the case. We as individuals can produce a report that ultimately goes to the police department or to the Oregon Department of Transportation, who is the keeper of the crash data. But obviously the majority of crashes that are reported are produced by a police force of some type. Yeah. Okay. Any more on safety before we move on? This map is an illustration of where those serious injury crashes occurred and where the fatal crashes occurred. And then you're also able to note, based on what's inside a circle, if it involved a pedestrian. So. Pardon me, a pedestrian or a bicyclist, yeah. Okay, we have one more, and then we can move on to the other portion of our meeting agenda. The last part of the system then is freight, rail, and utilities. I kind of mentioned this at the top, and I think what I'll do quickly is switch to the map. But our obligation is primarily to map where these facilities are, the railroads, the transmission lines, whether they're above ground or below ground, what type of transmission line they happen to be. With the railroads, where are the at-grade crossings, and are those crossings treated with signs or lights or the combination of the two, or they may be unmarked rail crossings. Those, of course, would be of concern to us because without markings, signs, or lights, we're dependent on whomever is crossing that rail line to be very mindful that a train could be approaching. And the next map is just an illustration of where these facilities are located. You see the heavy line on Highway 99. That's to acknowledge that it's a freight route. So that's a route designated by the state. The state expects freight to operate on that corridor and works to ensure that freight moves efficiently on this corridor.
Question.
Yeah.
I've never seen freight move through Sherwood in the 5 years I've been here. Is this line operational?
It's
It's an emergency service line for if there are any issues with the lines down over in Lake Oswego, that they can push cars over the hill. And I'm hoping we can get a statement from the railroad that kind of just makes that clear of how they use it, because we get a lot of questions about that. And
Yeah, it's like
there's-
rails
it's
to
not
trails,
used,
like,
but
what's
it is,
going on?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
an emergency route for them
Okay.
to be able to push commerce over to Salem back way.
Maybe that should be addressed in here.
Yep.
The line outside of town, actually going towards Newburgh, they have a couple of trestles are weight limited. And so, and they do use it. And like when they were building the West light rail, heavy rail line for TriMet, if anybody was around when they did that, they were using that, are the tracks through town. And to the surprise of some folks, that homes butted up against that line. And they did that for more days than people would like. But so when they do, and it's been a while since they've used it, they have to they have to make a smaller load. Usually it's a shorter train to go over those trestles. So there's all sorts of fun that they go through if they do use it.
Quite windy.
And they have aspirations to think that line can be converted in the future to another TriMet West line, heavy rail commuter line, but it would take a lot for that to happen.
okay.
Yeah, active low use line.
So Nick, I think what I'd like to do is to have you move to the performance measures section. And I'm going to turn it over to Nick now to move to the second portion of the meeting tonight. So take it away, Nick.
Thanks, Phil. All right. So we'll have a little discussion, and then we'll have a chance to do some interactive polling with folks. We'll talk a little bit about the introduction to how transportation planning is changing in Oregon and what that means for our discussion this evening. So with the recent changes to transportation planning in Oregon, there's really been a transition from the way that transportation planning is done in the past to a new performance-based approach. And that's the performance-based approach to measuring the effectiveness of the overall transportation system. And so what we want to get from you all tonight is we want to ask a series of questions to inform the development of those measures and standards that we use to assess the system. A couple of kind of big picture things about, what is performance-based approach. Here's a definition from the Federal Highway Department. But it's basically a different approach to decision-making where it really looks at maximizing the return on investment and achieving desired outcomes. And so it starts with your goals, and then it transitions to objectives, and then we use our objectives to help develop performance measures. And that's how we evaluate whether the system is working or not working, so to speak. Just a quick refresher on the goals. We talked about these last time, and we had some good feedback from folks that we've incorporated into these. But there's a focus on safety, focus on system efficiency and economic environmental benefit, a reliable and resilient system, accommodating travel needs of residents and businesses by providing travel options, and then seamlessly connecting the community with a variety of accessible travel options. Again, performance-based planning, we start with goals, and then we move into objectives, and then we look at measures and indicators, and that's how we develop our evaluation criteria. So the red box really highlights what we want to gain from you all tonight. And we've developed a series of questions that align with the goals and what we're thinking in terms of initial performance standards that will help us inform artwork. Phil, do you have anything to add before we kind of move into the poll?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Any questions on kind of a performance-based approach?
I'm not seeing any, Nick.
Okay. So folks can get out their phones, and you should be able to scan that QR code, or if you have another electronic device, you can go to slido.com and enter that number.
All right, so let's be clear. So how, who's managing, whose surveys you're taking? Because there, we have guests and people are not here, and so.
Yep, we're just looking for some feedback from the folks who are present tonight on the Citizen Advisory Committee.
Great. So people that are not doing,
So all of the guests that are not Citizen Advisory Committee members, please do not take this poll.
Joy, they're welcome to if that's okay with you.
that's,
I would,
you need to regulate it.
yeah, I would pass on that. I
Okay.
think there's only Mark is on online, but he's not a member of the Citizen Advisory. So Mark, if you can just not do the poll, that would be great.
I'm not listed here. I don't know if I'm part of the CAC. What do you think?
As a City of Sherwood employee that is part of this project team, you are
Okay.
entitled
All
to
right.
participate.
Just want to clear that. About to answer.
So should we be putting our noses down now and going through the 12?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And Phil, can you let me know when seems like everyone's scanned the QR code, and I'll switch over to the results.
You bet. I'll watch for kind of a thumbs up from individuals.
completed.
They're completed, okay.
Maybe one or two more.
There you go. Watch out. Trick or treat. Tell you what, we'll just slide this on down.
How are we doing?
Brady, are you done? Oh, okay.
Oh, he was already working on other stuff.
He had the fast fingers going.
All right. Nick, it looks like we're done here in the room.
All right. So I'll move. Well, so I'm just going to jump to next steps before we start talking about the results, just in case we start to get low on time.
Sure. That's quick.
So as Phil mentioned, we're going to give folks through Monday, December 1st to provide any additional comments on the existing conditions memo. Sherwood is hosting a holiday or winter open house showcasing ongoing projects, including the TSP. Joyce and Jason are coordinating that. We're working on developing the community engagement plan with Joy and Jason. And then the conversation we're having tonight about performance standards, we're bringing to the city council for discussion on January 6th. That's important because once we know how we intend to measure the future system, we can begin our future conditions analysis. So our next round of meetings is likely going to be in the late winter, early spring timeframe.
So if you can send any of your comments to me, and I'll share them with the team by the end of day on December 1st, so you guys can go through after the holiday.
Great. Thanks, Joy. All right. Can folks see the poll?
Yep.
All right. So I think the first thing to know is there's no wrong answers. So hopefully this didn't stress anyone out and they didn't have any test anxiety about answering these questions. These are really going to help us inform our work internally, what we work on with the city when it comes to performance measures and standards, and also inform the conversation that we have with the city council on January 6th. So the first question, when necessary, I would prioritize the safety of people walking over people in cars. Looks like there's 55% that strongly agreed and 27% that agreed, and then 18% that were neither agreed nor disagreed. And so what that means is, we would likely start to develop performance measures that focus on improving safety. This one gets at the issue of a complete network versus the quality of a network. And so the question is, a smaller network of buffered or protected bicycle lanes is more important than a larger network of painted bicycle lanes. Looks like there's pretty strong agreement, or in the middle there, neither agree nor disagree. I'd expect folks are looking they want to be able to get to their destination, but they also want comfort. When possible, sidewalks should be wider and include street trees and vegetation. Strongly agree and agree are at
Can I make a comment on this question right here?
Sure.
The
Please,
sidewalk,
yeah.
you could not be in favor of a wider sidewalk, keep normal sidewalks, but include street trees and vegetation. So you've got a wider corridor, but not a wider sidewalk, which is my personal feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. And that relates to, we were talking.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
you can argue, I can weigh in on every one of these questions almost about, there's a nuance, if it was a choice between street trees, sidewalks, and bike lanes, what priority would you do it?
Yeah.
Because there's always those.
That's a forced choice. That's very good.
And separated, or there's new facilities and trying to put a facility in an existing space
Mhm.
challenges.
Similarly to things that are not addressed with the questions are what priority is made to minimize the distance between for destinations for pedestrians especially, but also for cyclists. In other words, are you going to prioritize making a direct connection to, have a 500-yard route versus a 3/4-mile route?
Mhm.
The 3/4-mile route maybe being safer, or being quieter, but the direct one, I don't know, being a little more noisy,
Right,
even though it might be safe.
right.
So.
Okay, thank you.
I'd prefer to walk to the grocery store or nearby restaurants instead of drive if there was a comfortable sidewalk. Looks like folks were pretty spread across the board on this one.
So again, yeah, what's nearby? What's the definition of nearby? How far do people want to or willing to walk? So it's
Similarly, I would prefer to bike to the grocery store, nearby restaurants instead of drive if there were comfortable bike facilities. Certainly a split on this one.
Depends on the weather.
Can I add a quick comment too on these questions, this one and the last one?
Mhm.
I think these questions are written in a way that limits the purpose of the ped and bike facilities and the transportation network for the purpose of going to a destination, as opposed to, I think in Sherwood, there's a lot of people that use the ped and bike facilities for recreation or fitness or other non-destination purpose. So like, for example, I don't live close enough. I have walked to Walmart, but it takes a long time. So like, I would say no on those, but I do use the pedestrian system. It's important. Like, so if you had another category in there, for those purposes or other, recreational purposes, it might have a different response.
Got it.
More favorable towards it.
Right, right. Thank you.
yeah, the recreation element is generally ignored in this poll.
It is. Yep.
Well, and I like all this feedback on the questions because that means people had to kind of think pretty hard about some of their answers, and that means we're hopefully getting some people to make some harder choices, which will then help us inform our work. Congestion is okay as long as I can predict how long the overall trip will take. Between agree and strongly agree, it's 64%. And then some folks are in the middle and some folks disagree. I have flexibility to avoid congestion when traveling to destinations by car. Quite a bit of agreement there. I'm comfortable biking in low volume and low speed mixed traffic. Certainly lots of agreement there. Residential streets should be designed to reinforce slow speed limits. Also strong agreement there. I'm more likely to walk to my destination if there are frequent places to safely cross the street. Between strongly agree and agree, it's just over 80%. I'd prefer to take more direct bike routes, but I feel uncomfortable crossing busy signalized intersections. So people disagree with this one. So I'm curious if anyone is willing to share what their thoughts were on this disagreement one. Do they prefer kind of more circuitous routes if it's comfortable, or do they feel the intersections are comfortable?
If you're gonna ride your bike, you're gonna know what route you're gonna take, and you're gonna either be comfortable or uncomfortable, and you're gonna do it, and it doesn't really matter, or you're gonna find an alternative route.
Okay.
I mean, for this community, the big issue is getting across 99W.
Yeah.
And the lesser Tualatin Sherwood also. And, the crossings aren't bad, but the approaches to them are a little interesting. So
I used to ride our bike at night to go to the football games and cross 99 from Sunset, and so it's like that was somewhat of a challenge, especially with the kid on the back. But at this point now, I'll be using the bridge, so it's moot.
Yeah, I would think if it said busy, unsignalized intersections, I would agree more, like Roy Rogers. But
Yeah, and when thinking about our students biking to school, I was thinking, there are greater risks than signalized intersections.
Yeah. Okay.
Student
Okay.
driver.
I'm sorry, what was that comment?
Student drivers
Student drivers.
around the schools, going to school.
So, Nick, we're right at 7 o'clock. Is this our last one?
This is the last one. So yeah, shorter
Perfect.
road crossings are more important than the duration on road is congested. Looks like that's a very fairly neutral response on this one.
All right. Well, thank you all for doing that with us. Clearly, it's not scientific, but it starts to give us suggestions, some sense of direction of where to go with some degree of confidence and where to think harder, because there's maybe not yet certainty as to a way to measure the system to say it's good, bad, or indifferent. So this isn't the last time we'll be talking about this, that's for sure. So we appreciate you indulging us with this first exercise. Go ahead.
Quick process question.
Yeah.
I don't think we got the revised goals back to us after the work that we put in on that.
You bet.
And that would be helpful, and it makes me wonder, are we going to get a chance to see performance standards and comment on them before a whole bunch of work is done on them?
Certainly, yeah. So we'll make sure that we post that final document to the website and send it out as an email to each of the committee members.
Excellent. So I want to thank Lisa and Councilor Keith Mays for attending remotely, and of course all of you guys for being here and taking the time today. So please send me your comments by December 1st. Happy holidays to all of you, and we'll reach out as we plan out our open house probably in January. It'll be an open house for the TSP update, but also other projects that the city's doing as far as transportation projects.
Would you prefer those comments marked up on the PDF or in a separate kind of Word doc?
It's up to you, however you'd like to provide them to me, whatever is easiest.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good evening and get home safe.
Thanks, everybody.